This is Ben with Cholinergic Urticaria.net, and in this video I'm going to talk about visceral fat and how to get rid of it. First of all, visceral fat is a different kind of fat. Whenever you think of someone being overweight, you tend to just think of that there's one type of fat, but there are different types of fat. Subcutaneous fat is the type of fat that will collect all around your skin. It's just beneath the upper portion of your skin, and you know, people will get the jiggly arms and the excess skin around the neck and so forth, and that's the subcutaneous fat. That fat seems to be a lot less dangerous than visceral fat. Visceral fat is perhaps the most dangerous fat on your body, and this is the fat that you get in your visceral region, which is your organ region, and it collects in there, tends to give people that pot belly look. It's also sometimes called a beer belly, and you know, a lot of people will collect this fat in this region, and they might look in shape, and they might have skinny legs, skinny arms, but they have this big pot belly. Well, that's visceral fat. And you want to be really careful with visceral fat, because visceral fat is metabolically active. And what that means is it actually secretes hormones. And what can happen with visceral fat is you can be at a higher risk for stroke or diabetes or heart disease. You can even have increased inflammation in your body. It could make your arthritis worse. It could make, if you have an autoimmune condition, it might make that worse. So it's definitely something to take very seriously. And if you have visceral fat on your body, you may be trying to find ways to get rid of it. Well, I'm going to talk about some exercises in this video that you can do, and just tell you what you can do to cut down the visceral fat as quickly as possible. So, okay, first of all, if you have visceral fat and you want to get rid of it, one of the things that you need to do is focus on cardiovascular exercise. Weightlifting can also help, and I do advocate weightlifting along with cardiovascular exercise, but cardiovascular exercise is the best. Before you start an exercise program though, always talk to your doctor to make sure it's safe. And this is especially important if you have visceral fat, because you can have, clogged arteries or an increased risk for heart attack or stroke or something. So you may want to get a checkup with your doctor and make sure that they understand you're going to go on a cardiovascular exercise program. Now, what I would recommend for cardiovascular, there's a few ways you can do it. And a stationary exercise bike, that's one method of cardio. Another method, you could do like jump rope. You can do an elliptical. You can do a treadmill. You can run. You can jog. Any of those things will get your heart rate up, and that's a good form of cardiovascular exercise. You want to do it at least about 30 minutes a day, and you want to do it probably at least 4 to 5 times per week. Some even advocate as much as 6 times a week. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is it doesn't really matter how much you exercise if you're eating too much food. So the second part of losing your visceral fat is you've got to watch your diet. And whenever you're exercising, the key is that you do enough exercise and you eat a certain amount of calories per day, so that you are on a deficit of about 500 calories per day. So if you can create a deficit of 500 calories per day in your diet, that's going to make you lose roughly a pound a week. And that's a safe way to lose weight. You don't want to lose much more than a pound or 2 a week, because if you go quicker than that, sometimes you can get in a habit where you try to binge diet, and then you'll go back and you'll binge eat and so forth, and you keep going back and forth. It's better to do things gradually. And so one way you can find out how many calories you need to eat per day is go to a calorie counter website. And there's a lot of free ones on the web where you can just go, you can enter your information such as your weight, your height, your age, and so forth. And this will tell you how many calories per day you currently need now, or eat now approximately, to maintain your weight, and how many calories you need to eat to lose about 1 pound per week. And you want to get that number, and you want to start looking at nutrition labels and make sure that you're eating about 500 calories below what your normal intake is now. That will help you lose about a pound per week. Okay, so, and you also have to consider how many calories you're burning with exercise. So it'll also ask when you do a calorie counter how much you're going to exercise. So make sure that you enter an accurate number for that, so that it'll tell you roughly what you need to eat. That's really the key to losing visceral fat. You have to watch your diet, your calorie intake, and you have to do cardiovascular exercise. You can do weightlifting too, and it's always good. Sometimes I will exercise with cardiovascular, and then I'll do like maybe 15 minutes of weights. And that's good too, because you want to build those muscles, and those muscles can help your metabolism increase a little bit. and maybe even increase your testosterone and so forth. And so you do want to mix in weights, but you don't want to just do weights only. Cardiovascular tends to burn a lot more calories within the same time period. So say you might do 30 minutes of cardio and burn 200 to 300 calories, whereas 30 minutes of weights may only burn half of that. So cardiovascular exercise tends to be much more effective in losing weight. One thing that's not going to work is spot reduction, which is like, say you have the big beer belly thing and you began to do crunches. Well, you're going to burn calories in crunches, but you're only going to burn so many calories and burn so much fat when you do that. And you will build up your muscles in your abs, but your muscles will be outside of that visceral fat. That visceral fat's inside, deep in your intestines and just your whole visceral region. And that's what you got to get to. You got to get to that. And the only way to do that is eating below your calorie intake and using exercise to get that calorie number down to where you're about 500 calories or so less per day. And that's going to help you burn about 1 pound per week. And once you burn, 5-10 pounds, you want to go back to the calorie counter and enter your new weight, and it'll readjust, because each time you lose weight, your body will require even less calories to sustain that current weight. So you have to adjust it every few weeks. So that's the gist of how you're going to lose that visceral fat. Now, another thing I'll say about visceral fat that's really interesting is a lot is involved with genetics of how your body puts on fat. I'm a rather skinny guy. I'm almost 6'1". I weigh about 158 pounds or so. And whenever I tend to gain weight, and the most I've ever weighed is about 170. And that may not sound like a lot of weight, but I was putting a lot of weight right here in my visceral region. And so your genetics is going to determine a lot where you put on the weight, because even though I wasn't really gaining much weight in my arms and legs or face, but I was getting a little bit of a pot belly on me, and I had to get control of my diet, and I brought it down, and right now I'm about 158, and I don't really have a visceral fat problem at all. So that's a genetic thing. My father, I've noticed, even though my mother and my father divorced when I was young and he moved away, but anyway, I've seen a picture of him when he was older, and he had just a really large belly. And that was just visceral fat right there. And that's what I've got to watch out personally, because that's the way I gain weight. Some people, when they gain weight, they gain a lot of subcutaneous fat and not so much visceral fat. And that's actually safer fat. So those are just some facts about visceral fat. If you have visceral fat or a pot belly, watch out. Another thing I want to warn you about is alcohol. Alcohol, that's why they call it a beer belly, right? Because it tends to add a lot of calories, and so if you're drinking a lot of alcohol, you probably want to cut back on your alcohol intake. I don't drink alcohol at all, and I don't really advocate alcohol, so I'm not going to preach to you. But if you drink alcohol, you want to consider getting rid of that so you can get rid of that visceral fat. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this video has helped a little, educate you a little bit about visceral fat, and have a great day.